I want you to understand something before I tell you any of this. I was not brave. I was not prepared. I was a 29-year-old assistant manager at a Nordstrom who had spent 11 years learning how to fold dress shirts and manage seasonal inventory rotations. When the world cracked open, I didn't grab a weapon or fill a bag with supplies. I grabbed my car keys, drove 6 miles on a highway that was already clotting with abandoned vehicles, and ran through the south entrance of the King of Prussia Mall at 4:47 in the morning because it was the biggest building I knew that had steel security gates on every entrance. That was December 14th. The outbreak had been building for 9 days by then, though none of us understood what we were watching during the first 4. The news called it a rabies mutation. The CDC called it acute necrotizing encephalopathy with aggression syndrome. My mother, in her last phone call to me from her house in Allentown, called it the devil walking in sick people's shoes. She told me to pray. I told her to lock the doors. I haven't heard her voice since December 11th. The mall was dark when I arrived, not pitch black. The emergency lighting still held, those pale institutional panels every 40 feet that turned the corridors into something that felt like a hospital basement. The fountains were off. The music was off. I could hear my own breathing bounce off marble floors that had been walked on by 100,000 people a week and were now so empty that my footsteps sounded like someone hammering nails into silence. I came in through the Nordstrom loading dock. I knew the code. 7741, then the red lever on the left side, then shoulder the door because it always stuck. The smell inside was floor polish and recycled air. Normal, painfully normal. The mannequins in the women's department stood in their winter poses, wearing coats no one would ever buy. The first thing I did was seal the loading dock behind me. Steel door, manual deadbolt. Then I dragged 2 pallets of boxed winter merchandise against it. It wouldn't hold against a vehicle. But I wasn't worried about vehicles. I was worried about what I'd seen on Gulf Road. 3 people pulling a woman out of a minivan by her hair while she screamed into a pitch I didn't know a human throat could produce. They weren't robbing her. They weren't angry. They were biting. I worked through Nordstrom's ground floor and into the main mall corridor. My phone flashlight cut a white circle through the dark. The directory sign near the center court listed over 400 stores, 2 anchor department stores, 3 levels, a total footprint of nearly 3 million square feet. I had walked these hallways since I was 14, shopping with my mother, eating Auntie Anne's pretzels, killing time in the Apple store. I knew this building like a second body. That familiarity made me arrogant. I believed I was alone. The first gate I sealed was the JCPenney corridor on the east side. The security gate was already halfway down. Someone had triggered it before evacuating. I found the manual crank behind the information kiosk and rolled it to the floor. The steel kissed the tile with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Then I moved to the Macy's wing on the northwest side. Same process, crank, lower, lock. It took me 3 hours to seal every exterior-facing entrance I could find. 14 gates total, 2 loading docks, 1 fire exit near the food court that I barricaded with 8 restaurant tables, and a commercial refrigerator I slid across the floor on a furniture dolly I found inside a pottery barn. By 8 a.m., the sun was coming through the skylights 3 stories above. Clean, indifferent winter light. I sat on a bench outside a Swarovski store and drank a bottle of water I'd taken from a vending machine I'd broken open with a fire extinguisher. I thought I was safe. Then I heard footsteps on the level above me. Not shuffling, not dragging, walking. Measured and human, moving east to west along the upper gallery with a rhythm that suggested purpose. Someone else was already inside. I didn't call out. I want to make that clear because later, when people ask me why I didn't announce myself immediately, They said it like it was a moral failure. But you need to understand what 9 days of collapse does to your instincts. You stop assuming the best. You stop treating silence as empty. Every unknown sound becomes a decision tree. Threat, resource, or complication. Another person inside the mall was all three simultaneously. I moved to the escalator, frozen in place, just ridged metal stairs now, and climbed to the second level with my phone light off. The skylights gave me enough. I pressed myself against the railing outside a Banana Republic and listened. The footsteps had stopped. Then a voice. Female, mid-range, controlled but strained. I can hear you breathing. I didn't answer. You came in through the loading dock. I heard the door. If you're infected, you wouldn't have sealed the gates behind you. So either announce yourself, or I'm going to assume you're a threat and act accordingly. I stepped into the corridor light with my hands visible. My name is Marcus. Marcus Calloway. I work at the Nordstrom downstairs. I'm not infected. She was standing 40 feet away outside a darkened Lululemon, holding a golf club. A 3-iron from the look of it, probably from the Dick's Sporting Goods on the lower level. She was mid-30s, Southeast Asian, hair pulled back tight. She wore a mall security uniform, the navy polo and black tactical pants. But the badge on her belt was turned backward, like she didn't want me to read her name. How long have you been in here? I asked. Since the 11th. 3 days before me. 3 days alone in this cathedral of commerce while the world outside dissolved. My name is Lena, she said, lowering the club slightly but not all the way. Lena Nguyen. I was working the night shift when everything went sideways. The day team never showed up. Management never called. I sealed what I could and waited for someone to come. Nobody came. Until me. Until you. She studied me the way you study weather, looking for what's coming, not what's present. You sealed the rest of the gates. I heard you working. All 14, both loading docks, the food court fire exit. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust. Something adjacent. Acknowledgement that I had done something useful. There's a problem, she said. I waited. I've been through most of the first and second floor. Stores, back corridors, maintenance halls. This building is enormous, Marcus. I haven't been able to clear the third level, and I haven't been able to get into the utility basement at all. The access doors down there need a facilities key I don't have. What kind of problem are we talking about? She looked past me, down the corridor toward the food court. 2 nights ago, I was sleeping in the security office near Center Court. I woke up to sounds. Not outside the building, inside, below me. Something moving through the ventilation system. Dragging sounds. Then a smell. You know the smell. If you've been outside in the last week, you know it. I knew it. The sweet, biological rot that the infected carried like a signature. It wasn't decomposition exactly. It was something metabolic. Something the mutation did to their chemistry, like spoiled fruit and copper. You're telling me something is already in here? I'm telling you that I sealed every entrance I had access to on December 11th. Whatever is down there came in before me. Or there's an entry point I haven't found. The mall suddenly felt different. 3 million square feet is a number. It's abstract. But standing in that corridor with Lena, knowing that somewhere below us or behind a locked door, something infected was breathing in the same recycled air. 3 million square feet became a labyrinth. We need to clear this building, I said. Yes. And if we find them? Lena lifted the golf club onto her shoulder. Then we find out if a 3-iron works on something that used to be a person. She turned and walked toward the security office. After a moment, I followed. The security office was tucked behind the center court information desk, through a door marked Authorized Personnel, that Lena had propped open with a rubber doorstop. Inside, the room was small and methodical. A desk, 3 monitors showing static from disconnected cameras, a corkboard with shift schedules that would never be followed again, and a cot Lena had assembled from seat cushions pulled out of a restoration hardware. She had supplies organized on the desk with military neatness. Bottled water from the food court, stacked in groups of 6. Protein bars from a GNC on the first floor, sorted by flavor. A first aid kit from the security closet. 2 flashlights, 1 headlamp, a ring of master keys that she explained only opened retail units, not utility infrastructure. She had a walkie-talkie that received nothing but static and a battery-operated weather radio that, when she turned it, produced a looped emergency broadcast. This is the emergency alert system. Remain indoors. Do not approach individuals displaying erratic behavior. Assistance is being mobilized. It had been saying the same thing since December 8th. Assistance was not being mobilized. I've mapped what I can, Lena said, pulling a hand-drawn layout from under the desk. She'd used the back of a promotional poster. The map was careful, color-coded. Green areas she'd cleared and confirmed empty. Yellow areas she'd passed through but not fully searched. Red areas she hadn't entered at all. The 3rd floor was almost entirely red. The utility basement was solid red with a question mark in the center. There are 4 access points to the basement, she said, pointing. 1 near the Macy's freight elevator, 1 behind the food court, 1 through the JCPenney service corridor, and 1 inside the facilities management office near the south parking garage entrance. All of them are locked with a key I don't have. Can we break them? Steel fire doors with commercial deadbolts. I tried the one near the food court with a pry bar from a hardware kiosk. Didn't even scratch it. What about the vents? You said you heard something in the ventilation. Lena sat on the edge of the desk. The HVAC system in a building this size is a network. Ducts run between floors, through walls, into the basement mechanical rooms. Some of the vent covers in the service corridors are large enough for a person to fit through. But I'm not crawling into a duct when I don't know what's on the other end. I looked at her map. The green zones formed a fragile archipelago of safety. The security office, the main 1st floor corridor, portions of the 2nd floor near the escalators. Everything else was uncertainty. We should talk about rules, Lena said. Rules. If we're going to share this space and not get each other killed, we need structure. I've been security here for 4 years. I know how people behave in enclosed environments under stress. They get territorial. They get paranoid. They make decisions based on fear instead of information. We establish rules now, before any of that has a chance to root. She was right, and I recognized something in her demeanor that I respected. She wasn't performing authority. She was drawing from a well of practical experience that had nothing to do with ego. First rule, she said. We don't go anywhere alone until the building is cleared. Second rule, every door we open, we mark. Green tape for clear, red tape for dangerous. I have both in the supply closet. Third rule, if either of us shows symptoms, fever, aggression, disorientation, the shaking, we tell the other immediately. No hiding, no denial. And what happens then? We figure that out if it happens, but we don't lie about it. I agreed to all 3 rules. They felt like scaffolding. Not strong enough to hold up a collapsing structure, but enough to stand on while you assess the damage. We spent the rest of that first day together inventorying the food court. 14 restaurants, most with walk-in coolers that were still holding temperature on residual charge. We had perishables that would last 3 days and dry goods that would last months. Rice from the teriyaki place, canned tomatoes from the pizzeria, industrial bags of flour and sugar, enough bottled water in the storage rooms to sustain 10 people for weeks. For 2 people, we had a fortress. If the fortress was actually empty. We began clearing the 3rd floor on December 15th, the morning after I arrived. Lena took point with the golf club. I carried a baseball bat I'd pulled from Dick's Sporting Goods. Aluminum, 34 inches, the kind designed to send a fastball over a fence. It felt wrong in my hands, not because it was heavy, but because my body understood that I wasn't holding a piece of sporting equipment anymore. The 3rd floor of the King of Prussia Mall is anchored by large lifestyle stores and flanked by smaller boutiques. The corridor is wide, the ceilings higher, the natural light stronger because of the skylight configuration. It should have felt safer than the dim lower levels. It didn't. Something about the elevated position made me feel exposed, as though the floor itself was a stage and anything watching from the wings had the advantage. We moved store by store. Lena's method was systematic. Approach the storefront, check through the glass, open the security gate if it was down, enter with flashlights active, sweep the sales floor, check the back stockroom, mark the door frame with green tape. Most stores were empty and untouched, frozen in their December displays. A pottery barn with a holiday table setting arranged for 8 invisible guests. A Williams-Sonoma with a demonstration station still set up for what looked like a cinnamon roll baking class. An Anthropology where the air smelled like sandalwood candles and the clothing racks stood like fabric tombstones. By midday, we'd cleared 19 stores. My arms ached from gripping the bat. My eyes hurt from the constant scanning. Lena hadn't spoken more than 20 words since we started, and I was beginning to understand that her silence wasn't coldness. It was concentration. She listened to the building the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat, alert for arrhythmia. The 20th store was a vacant unit between a Tiffany and a Coach, still under construction. The storefront was covered in brown paper, and behind it, the space was gutted. Raw concrete, exposed ceiling ducts, a scatter of drywall scraps and construction tools. We almost skipped it. Then Lena stopped and lifted her hand. "Smell that." I inhaled. Underneath the plaster dust, faint but distinct. Copper and overripe fruit. The infected smell. "It's not fresh," Lena said quietly. "It's residual. Something was in here recently." We entered slowly. My flashlight swept the space in sections. Empty scaffolding along the left wall. A stack of drywall sheets in the back corner. A portable toilet that mercifully appeared unused. And then, against the far wall, behind a rolling tool chest, a vent cover, removed and set neatly on the floor. Not fallen, removed. The screws were placed in a small pile beside it, organized by size. Lena crouched next to the opening. The duct beyond was large. Industrial scale, at least 3 feet across. Warm air breathed from inside it, like the exhalation of something vast and sleeping. "This connects to the HVAC main," she said. "Runs down through the walls to the mechanical room in the basement. Something came up through here. Or went back down." She shined her flashlight into the duct. The beam disappeared into blackness after about 15 feet. There was a dark smear along the bottom of the metal. Not rust, something organic. I put green tape on the door frame, but wrote a V on it in marker. Vent access, compromised. We finished the 3rd floor by late afternoon. 31 stores, 2 anchor corridors, 6 restrooms, and 3 service hallways. Aside from the vacant unit, everything was clear. No infected, no bodies, no signs of forced entry or struggle. But the vent changed the calculus entirely. Whatever Lena had heard moving beneath the building had a pathway upward. The sealed gates and barricaded doors meant nothing if the internal circulatory system of the mall, its ducts, its crawl spaces, its mechanical arteries, was already being used as a highway. That night, we ate cold teriyaki rice in the security office and didn't talk about what we'd found. Sometimes silence is denial, and sometimes silence is two people doing math in their heads, calculating odds they don't want to say out loud. I woke at 2 a.m. to Lena standing over me with her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She just pointed upward. I listened. Above the security office ceiling, in the ductwork that ran like veins through the building's skeleton, something was moving. Not the random ticking of cooling metal or the hum of residual systems. This was rhythmic, a slow, deliberate drag, like a heavy bag being pulled across sheet metal. Then it stopped. Then it started again, this time from a different direction, as if whatever was up there had changed course. We stood in the dark and tracked the sound with our eyes, following it across the ceiling from east to west, then south toward the food court. It lasted approximately 4 minutes. Then silence returned like a door closing. "That's closer than before," Lena whispered. "2 nights ago, it was below me. Now it's on this level. 1, or more than 1. I've never heard more than 1 set of sounds at a time, but I can't be certain." Sleep was finished for both of us. We sat in the office with the door locked and talked for the first time about something other than logistics. I learned that Lena had been born in Philadelphia, the daughter of Vietnamese refugees who had opened a nail salon in Kensington when she was 4. She'd joined mall security after 6 years in the Army Reserve, 2 of which were spent at a forward operating base in Kuwait, where her primary duty was monitoring perimeter surveillance feeds. She told me the mall job felt like a downgrade until nights like this, when the training clicked into place like a magazine seating into a rifle. I told her about my mother, about the phone call on the 11th and the silence after, about my apartment in Norristown with the plants I'd never water again and the cat I'd left with a neighbor who probably wasn't there anymore either. Her name was Biscuit, the cat, not the neighbor. Lena didn't laugh at the name, but something in her face softened. And I understood that we were doing the things survivors do in the dark, trading pieces of our former lives like currency, trying to prove to each other and ourselves that we had been real before this. "The basement access," I said, pulling us back. "We need to get down there." Agreed. But the keys are a problem. Unless we can find the facilities manager's office and hope he left a set behind. Where's the facilities office? South corridor, ground floor, behind the parking garage entrance. It's not locked with a master. It's a separate system. Keypad. I don't have the code. Can we break a keypad lock? Maybe, if we can pull the panel and bypass the solenoid. I've seen it done, but never done it myself. I've watched enough YouTube to be dangerous. She almost smiled. Almost. Tomorrow, then. We find the facilities office, we get in, we get the basement keys, and we go down. And if we find infected down there, then we deal with it in a controlled space with known exits. Better than waiting for them to come up through the vents into our sleeping quarters. She was right. The mathematics of this situation were simple. Every hour we delayed gave whatever was in the basement another hour to find a path upward. We had sealed the exterior. Now we needed to secure the interior, or at least understand the geography of the threat. I spent the remaining hours until dawn sitting against the wall, listening to the building breathe. A mall at night is never truly silent. The structure settles. Air moves through channels designed to circulate endlessly. Somewhere deep in the walls, pipes contracted in the cold. Every sound became a question I couldn't answer, At 6 a.m., the skylights began to glow. Another winter sunrise filtered through the glass ceiling and laid pale rectangles of light across the empty corridors. I watched it from the office doorway and thought about how strange it was that beauty could still arrive on schedule while everything human had failed. Lena was already packing a bag for the basement expedition. The facilities management office was exactly where Lena said it would be. South corridor, ground floor, a beige door between an emergency exit and a janitor's closet. The keypad was a standard commercial unit, a 4x3 grid of rubber buttons with a small LED that glowed red. 4-digit code, I said. 10,000 possible combinations. We're not brute forcing it, Marcus. No, but look at the buttons. I shined my flashlight at an angle across the pad. 4 of the 12 buttons, 1, 3, 7, and 9, showed significantly more wear than the others. The rubber was smoother, shinier. Thousands of entries had polished them down. That narrows it to 24 combinations if the code uses each digit once, Lena said. And if I had to guess, facilities managers in retail buildings don't pick random sequences. They pick patterns they can punch quickly. Corners of the pad, clockwise or counterclockwise. I tried 1397, clockwise from top left. The LED stayed red. I tried 7931, counterclockwise from bottom left, red. I tried 1937, diagonal pattern, red. Lena watched without impatience. These systems usually lock out after 10 failed attempts. Then I have 7 more chances to be clever. I stared at the keypad, thought about every facilities guy I'd ever worked with at Nordstrom, thought about the kind of person who manages mechanical systems in a mall. Practical, routine-oriented, efficient. What's the mall's address? 160 North Gulf Road. I typed 1600. The LED turned green. The lock clicked. Lena stared at me. The address. Nobody remembers a random code. Everyone remembers their work address. The office inside was cramped and utilitarian. A metal desk buried under work orders. A wall-mounted board with labeled key hooks. Most of them empty. Their keys presumably on the belt of a facilities manager who was either dead or infected somewhere beyond these walls. But 3 key rings remained. One was labeled HVAC main. One was labeled electrical room basement. And the third, on a heavy brass ring with a red tag, was labeled utility access. All floors. I took all 3. Behind the desk, pinned to the wall beneath a calendar still showing November, was a full building schematic, a blueprint of the mall's lower level that I had never seen before. It showed the basement as a network of service tunnels connecting the mechanical rooms, electrical distribution centers, water treatment systems, and freight passages that linked the anchor stores underground. The scale was staggering. The basement level was nearly as large as the retail floors above it, a mirror world of concrete and steel that existed solely to keep the upper world functioning. There are 6 mechanical rooms, Lena said, tracing the blueprint with her finger. 2 main HVAC stations, a central electrical hub, a water pump room, and 2 storage areas. The tunnels connect all of them in a loop. A loop means multiple escape routes. A loop also means something can circle behind us. She pulled the blueprint off the wall and folded it carefully. We gathered our supplies: flashlights, the bat, the golf club, a roll of green and red tape, 2 bottles of water, and a can of spray paint I'd grabbed from a hardware kiosk for marking walls. The nearest basement access door was behind the food court, through a service corridor I'd walked past 100 times as an employee, without ever thinking about what lay on the other side. The door was painted gray, marked with a small placard, Utility. Authorized personnel only. I inserted the brass key. It turned smoothly. The lock disengaged with a sound that felt final. The stairwell beyond was concrete. Bare fluorescent fixtures lined the ceiling, but only every third one still functioned, casting pools of light separated by intervals of shadow. The stairs descended one flight and ended at another door. This one heavier, painted industrial green. "Ready?" I asked. Lena adjusted her grip on the golf club and nodded. I opened the door to the basement, and the smell hit us like a wall. The smell was layered. The bottom note was mechanical. Grease, concrete dust, the cold metallic tang of infrastructure. Above that, stagnant water, probably from a drainage system that had stopped cycling. And riding on top of everything, undeniable and thick enough to taste, the signature of infection. That sweetness, that wrongness, that biological distress signal that every surviving human had learned to interpret as a single word: run. We didn't run. We stood at the threshold and let our flashlights map the space. The basement corridor stretched in both directions, maybe 8 feet wide and 7 feet tall. The concrete floor was painted gray and streaked with utility cart tire marks. Overhead, pipes of varying diameters ran in bundled highways, color-coded by system. Blue for water, red for fire suppression, silver for HVAC. The fluorescent lights here were sparse and failing, creating a visual rhythm of illumination and darkness that made distance impossible to judge. "Left goes toward the Macy's mechanical room," Lena said, consulting the blueprint. "Right goes toward the central electrical hub and HVAC station 1. The smell is coming from the right. Then we go right." I wanted to argue. Every animal instinct in my body said, move away from the scent. But Lena's logic was sound. We weren't down here to avoid the problem. We were here to locate it, quantify it, and determine whether this building could actually be made safe, or whether we were sleeping in a cage with something hungry. We moved right. Lena took point, golf club raised, flashlight mounted on her shoulder, using a strap she'd fabricated from a belt and some Velcro. I followed 3 paces behind, bat in my right hand, flashlight in my left, swinging the beam in slow arcs to cover our rear. The first room we passed was a storage space. Door open, interior stacked with folding tables, holiday decoration bins, and rolled-up event banners. I swept the flashlight through it. Empty. Green tape on the doorframe. The second room was locked. A placard reading "Electrical Distribution. Panel C." I used the brass key. Inside, a wall of circuit breakers hummed with residual charge. The emergency lighting system's battery backup was housed here, explaining why parts of the mall still had power. Nothing else. Green tape. The third room was different. The door was ajar, not open. Ajar, as if it had been pushed closed but hadn't latched. Through the gap, my flashlight caught something on the floor. A dark stain, approximately 2 feet in diameter, still faintly wet at its center. The color was wrong for machine oil, too dark for water, too red for anything I wanted it to be. Lena pushed the door open with the head of the golf club. The room was HVAC Station 1, the primary mechanical room for the mall's eastern wing. Massive air handlers lined the walls, their fans still turning slowly on residual power, pushing air through ducts that led to every corner of the building above us. The room was cold, well below the temperature of the corridors. The air handlers created a constant low roar that swallowed smaller sounds. On the floor between 2 air handlers, arranged with unsettling neatness, were 3 piles. Each pile consisted of clothing: a jacket, shirt, pants, shoes folded and stacked, as if someone had undressed methodically and placed their garments in order. 3 piles, 3 people, no bodies. The stain was near the first pile. Another, smaller stain near the second. The third pile was clean. They were here, I said. 3 of them. They undressed. Lena's voice was tight. Why would infected people undress? I didn't have an answer. Everything I'd seen of the infected. On television, on the highway, through windows I wished I'd never looked through, suggested beings driven by compulsion, not cognition. They didn't plan. They didn't organize. They bit and they moved and they spread. But someone had folded these clothes. Lena knelt beside the nearest pile and examined it without touching. A man's winter coat, size large. A Penn State sweatshirt, khaki pants, work boots, laces still tied, pulled off without unlacing. They're not mindless, she said quietly. Whatever is down here, it's not what we've been told. We marked the room with red tape and kept moving. The corridor curved to the left ahead, following the footprint of the building above, and the smell intensified as we rounded the bend. My flashlight caught something on the wall. A handprint, smeared at the edges, pressed into the concrete at approximately shoulder height. The fingers were spread wide, and the print was detailed enough that I could see the whorls of a thumbprint in the residue. The color was a deep brown red, dried but recent. Then another print, 4 feet ahead and slightly lower. Then another. A trail of handprints descending along the wall, like a narrative written in contact, each one a few inches lower than the last, as though the person leaving them had been walking and gradually hunching, curling inward, losing height. The last print was at knee level. After that, the trail became a smear along the floor, leading to a branching corridor marked Freight Passage. Anchor stores. They were changing, Lena said. Whoever made these was in the process of turning, walking upright, then hunching, then crawling, and heading deeper in. The freight passage was wider than the utility corridor, designed for pallet jacks and small vehicles. The ceiling was higher, and the emergency lights here were brighter, casting a yellow wash that gave the concrete walls a jaundiced quality. The passage ran straight for approximately 200 feet before splitting into a T-junction. According to the blueprint, the left branch led to the Macy's freight area, and the right led to a secondary storage complex and the water pump room. We followed the smear trail. It went right. Lena stopped at the junction and marked our direction with spray paint. An arrow on the wall pointing back the way we'd come. Breadcrumbs, she said. If we need to run, we follow the arrows. The secondary storage complex was a series of interconnected rooms. Old retail overflow, seasonal display materials, maintenance equipment. We cleared them one by one, the silence between us becoming its own communication. A glance to confirm readiness, a nod to proceed, a hand raised to pause. We had known each other for less than 36 hours, and already we were developing a shared language that words would have slowed down. The fourth storage room stopped us. It had been converted. That's the only word that fits. Someone had taken a room designed to hold boxes of Christmas decorations and turned it into a living space. Against the far wall, a mattress. Pulled from God knows where, maybe a furniture store above. Was laid on the floor with a pillow and a balled-up fleece blanket. Beside it, a plastic storage bin held water bottles, protein bars, and canned food. Not scavenged randomly. Selected, organized, intentional. On the opposite wall, someone had taped up pages torn from a book. I moved closer and read them. They were from a medical textbook. Sections on viral neurology, specifically pages about prion diseases and their effect on cognitive function. Passages were highlighted in yellow marker. Notes were written in the margins in a tight, angular handwriting. One note read, Day 3, motor control declining, cognition still present. Fight it. Another, Day 5, hunger is not hunger, it is something else. Do not eat what it wants. And a third, near the bottom of the last page, the handwriting barely legible, shaking. Day 8. I can still think, but I can feel myself becoming a passenger. Lena read over my shoulder. I heard her breath catch. Someone turned down here, I said, and they knew it was happening. They were documenting it. The clothes upstairs, the folded piles, they prepared. They knew they were going to lose themselves, and they took off their clothes. Identifiers, humanity markers. Before it happened. Where are they now? As if in answer, from somewhere deeper in the basement, past the water pump room, past the walls of this converted shelter, a sound rose through the floor and the concrete and the layered silence. Not a moan, not a scream, a hum, low, sustained, and harmonically complex, like a choir of one voice trying to remember what music was. Lena turned off her flashlight. In the sudden dark, the hum seemed to come from everywhere. We retreated. I'm not ashamed to admit it. There's a difference between cowardice and tactical withdrawal. And when an unknown sound fills a concrete basement with resonance you can feel in your sternum, the correct response is to regroup, not to charge forward on adrenaline and bravado. Back in the security office, we spread the blueprint on the desk and stared at it like generals studying a battlefield neither of us had been trained to fight on. The humming had stopped by the time we reached the stairwell. It lasted approximately 90 seconds. Lena timed it on her watch. 3 of them, I said, based on the clothing, maybe more. The notes said Day 8. If whoever wrote that was on Day 8 when they made the last entry, and the outbreak started roughly December 6th, they would have turned around December 14th, the day I arrived, which means they've been fully turned for 1 day, maybe less. What does that mean for us? Behaviorally? Lena leaned back in the chair and pressed her palms against her eyes. Everything I saw during the first days, on the security cameras, on the roads outside. The infected were aggressive, disorganized, fast. They swarmed. They bit. They didn't fold their clothes or tape medical pages to walls. So either these 3 are different, or the infection has stages we don't understand. Or both. I looked at the vent opening we'd found on the 3rd floor. The removed cover, the neatly organized screws. They knew the duct system. Whoever lived down there used the vents to move between floors. They did it while they were still cognizant. The question is whether they're still using them now. The humming, Lena said. That wasn't random vocalization. There was structure to it, pattern. You think they're communicating? I think they're doing something we don't have a framework for. And that scares me more than if they were just banging on walls. We spent the next hour reinforcing our position. I used duct tape and aluminum baking sheets from the food court to cover the 3 vent openings in the security office ceiling. It wasn't a seal. Determined hands could push through it. But it would make noise. An alarm system made of kitchen supplies and adhesive. Lena repositioned our sleeping area so that both of us faced the door and the ceiling simultaneously. She placed the golf club within arm's reach and set an empty glass bottle on the floor near each vent cover so that any vibration from above would cause it to topple. We need to go back down, she said. I know. We need to find where they are and determine if they can be contained. If there's a room we can seal them into, we do it. If there's an exit point we've missed, we find it and close it. And if they come at us, then we defend ourselves. The phrase sat between us like a stone. Defend ourselves. Against people who had folded their clothes and written coherent notes about their own deterioration. against minds that had fought the infection with textbook pages and willpower before losing, against whatever was left of 3 human beings who had tried harder than anyone I'd heard of to stay themselves. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark and listened to the building and thought about the note on the wall. I can still think, but I can feel myself becoming a passenger. I thought about what it would mean to be aware inside a body you no longer controlled, to watch your hands do things your mind screamed against, to feel the architecture of your identity dissolve while the light stayed on behind your eyes. It occurred to me that the infected might not be gone. They might be trapped, conscious observers locked inside hijacked machinery, witnessing everything, unable to intervene. The possibility was worse than any scenario involving mindless aggression. Aggression you can fight. Imprisonment you can only mourn. At 3:14 a.m., one of the glass bottles near the ceiling rattled. Just once. A single tremor, as if something had shifted its weight in the duct above us and then gone still. Lena's eyes were open. She'd heard it too. Neither of us moved until dawn. December 16th, our second descent. This time, we prepared differently. Lena had spent the morning constructing a barricade kit, lengths of chain from a jewelry display case, padlocks from a luggage store, and 2 heavy-duty carabiners from a North Face outlet. If we found a room to seal, we'd seal it permanently. I carried the bat, a flashlight, the spray paint, and something new, a portable Bluetooth speaker from an electronics store, loaded with a playlist I'd assembled from demo phones. Music, specifically a classical piano piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. My theory was unscientific and probably foolish, but the humming we'd heard suggested a relationship between the infected and organized sound. If they responded to tonal patterns, maybe music could function as a diagnostic tool. Play it and see what happens. If they're drawn to it, we'd know where they are. If they fled from it, we'd know which direction they'd go. Lena didn't dismiss the idea. She said it was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, and that in the current circumstances, the distinction might not matter. We re-entered the basement at 9 a.m. The smell was unchanged. We moved quickly through the cleared sections, following our spray paint arrows, and returned to the converted shelter room. Everything was as we'd left it. Mattress, supplies, medical pages on the wall. Except one thing. The highlighted textbook pages had been rearranged. 3 of them had been moved to a different section of the wall, clustered together. The highlighted passages on these particular pages all dealt with the same subject, the limbic system's role in emotional memory. One highlighted line read, "Emotional memory often persists even when declarative memory has been severely compromised." Someone had been back in this room after we left. Someone, or something, had returned to this shelter and reorganized research materials with thematic intent. My hands were shaking, not from cold. "They're still learning," I whispered. Lena examined the rearranged pages without responding. She photographed them with a phone she'd found charged in an Apple store. Documenting evidence, the soldier in her surfacing instinctively. We moved deeper, past the water pump room, which we cleared quickly. Mechanical, loud, empty. The corridor beyond narrowed and the ceiling dropped. This section of the basement was older, predating the mall's most recent renovation. The concrete was rougher, the lighting non-existent. We relied entirely on flashlights. The corridor ended at a large double door, painted red, with a faded sign, Central Mechanical Restricted Access. The doors were closed, but not locked. One of them was slightly bowed outward, as if pressure from within had warped the metal. I set the Bluetooth speaker on the floor, turned the volume to maximum, and pressed play. Debussy filled the corridor. The piano notes echoed off concrete and multiplied, becoming something larger than the original recording, something cathedral-sized and achingly beautiful in this ugly, industrial space. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, from behind the red doors, the humming returned. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a single sustained tone. It was following the music, not perfectly. The pitch wandered, the rhythm lagged. But unmistakably, whatever was behind those doors was attempting to harmonize with Debussy. 3 voices. I could distinguish them now. One lower, one mid-range, one higher. They wove around the piano melody like ivy around a trellis, imperfect and reaching. Lena put her hand on my arm. Her grip was iron. The music reached the piece's gentlest passage, those descending notes that feel like light falling through water. And the humming softened with it, followed it down, matched its tenderness with something that I cannot, even now, call anything other than feeling. When the piece ended, the humming continued for another few seconds, then faded. Silence pressed back in. Behind the red doors, we heard something else. Quieter, irregular. A sound I recognized from childhood, from hospital rooms, from my own worst nights. Crying. Muffled, broken, barely human in its timbre, but unmistakable in its meaning. Something behind those doors was weeping. We didn't open the doors, not then. We sat in the corridor with our backs against the wall, and the dead speaker between us. And we had the hardest conversation of our lives. "They're people," I said. "They were people," Lena corrected, but her voice lacked conviction. "You heard that. They followed the music. They cried when it stopped. Whatever the infection does to the body, something is still in there. Something that remembers. Remembering isn't the same as being. A parrot can mimic speech without understanding language. A neurological echo isn't consciousness. You don't believe that." Lena pulled her knees to her chest. In the flashlight's spill, she looked younger than her years and infinitely tired. "What I believe doesn't matter. What matters is whether those things behind that door will try to kill us if we open it." The notes said day 8. It's been at least 2 days since the last entry. Day 10, maybe day 11. The aggression we've seen in other infected. The biting, the swarming. We haven't seen any of that from these 3. They haven't attacked us. They haven't tried to break out. They've been reorganizing pages and harmonizing with piano music. That we know of. We've been in this building for 2 days, Marcus. We don't know what they do when we're not watching. She was right, but something in me had shifted when I heard the crying. It was a tectonic movement, deep and structural, the kind of change that rearranges everything built on top of it. I had entered this mall expecting to survive against monsters. I was now sitting outside a door that might contain something far more complicated and far more tragic than anything I'd prepared for. "Here's what we know," Lena said, switching to her operational voice, the one that organized chaos into action items. 3 individuals, likely infected, are occupying the central mechanical room. They have access to the duct system, which gives them mobility throughout the building. They have not demonstrated aggression toward us, but we cannot confirm they are non-hostile. They retain some cognitive function, including tonal recognition, emotional response, and possibly spatial reasoning. They are contained behind these doors voluntarily. Nothing is physically preventing them from entering the corridors. "Voluntarily," I repeated. "They're choosing to stay in there. It appears that way, which means they're choosing not to come after us. For now. Lena, what if they sealed themselves in? What if the last thing they did before losing full control was shut themselves into a room they couldn't easily leave, to protect anyone else in the building? She stared at the red doors. I watched her process this. The soldier in her wanted to chain the doors and never come back. The human in her was doing the math on what it meant to imprison beings that might still possess fragments of will and feeling. If we chain these doors, she said slowly, and they are still partially aware, we're locking conscious minds in a concrete room with no food, no water, and no hope. Yes. But if we leave the doors unchained, and they turn fully aggressive, lose whatever is holding them back, we have infected with building access, and we're sleeping 2 floors above them. Yes. The silence between those two truths was vast. We sat in it for a long time. Finally, Lena stood. We compromise. We chained the doors with enough slack for them to open approximately 6 inches. Enough to pass items through, not enough for a body to fit. We bring water and food to the door. We monitor. If their behavior changes, if they become aggressive, we tighten the chains. You want to take care of them. I want to gather more information before making an irreversible decision. There's a difference. But I saw her face in the flashlight. I saw the way she looked at those red doors. She didn't see a tactical problem. She saw a locked room with crying inside it, and she couldn't walk away from that. We chained the doors with 3 feet of slack. We left 6 bottles of water and a bag of protein bars in the gap. Then we went upstairs and didn't speak for 2 hours. The water was gone by morning. I checked at 6 a.m., descending alone against our own rules, because Lena had fallen into the deepest sleep I'd seen from her, and I couldn't bring myself to wake her. The bottles were empty and placed neatly, upright, caps replaced just inside the door gap. The protein bars were gone too, wrappers folded into a small square and set on top of the bottles. They had manners. The thought was absurd and devastating in equal measure. I left more water and food. As I set the bottles in the gap, I heard breathing from inside. Close. Whatever was nearest to the door was positioned just on the other side, maybe 2 feet from where I knelt. I could hear the rhythm of its respiration. Faster than normal, slightly ragged, but controlled. Not the panting of exertion or the gasping of aggression. Just breathing. The way a person breathes when they're awake and trying to stay calm. "My name is Marcus," I said to the door. I don't know why. The words came from somewhere below rational thought. "I left you water. I'll leave more tomorrow." The breathing paused. Then, from behind the door, a voice. Wrecked, barely functional, the consonants crushed and the vowels distorted. But forming a word, I understood. Thank. One word. A fragment of gratitude from a deteriorating mind. It hit me harder than anything I'd experienced in the entire outbreak. Harder than the highway. Harder than the silence from my mother's phone. Harder than the knowledge that the world I'd known was over. Because this word was proof. Proof that behind the infection, behind the neurological hijacking, behind whatever had turned these people into something feared and hunted, there was still someone home. Diminished, besieged, fading, but present. I went back upstairs and told Lena. She sat on the security office desk and stared at the wall for a long time. Then she said, "We need to find out who they were." We returned to the shelter room and examined the medical pages more carefully. In the margins of the last page, in handwriting that was barely a controlled scrawl, we found a name, Dr. Anand Mehta. The writing continued. I am, was, attending physician, internal medicine, Paoli Hospital. I came here on December 9th with 2 colleagues. We believed the mall's infrastructure could serve as a quarantine facility. We were exposed before arriving. We knew. We chose to isolate. God forgive us for what we become. Lena photographed every word. Dr. Anand Mehta. The name transformed the abstraction into biography. He had been a doctor. He had come here with a plan. Used the mall's size, its sealed environment, its resources as a quarantine zone. He and his colleagues had already been infected, and they knew it. They had descended into the basement not to hide from the world, but to protect it from themselves. The folded clothes, the neatly organized supplies, the medical research taped to the walls, the voluntary containment. Every detail we'd found was evidence of a deliberate, compassionate act of self-imprisonment performed by people who understood exactly what was happening to them and chose to spend their final coherent hours making sure they hurt no one else. I sat on the floor of that shelter room and felt something crack inside my chest. Not fear, not grief. Something older and less nameable. A recognition that heroism and horror could occupy the same body. That the most courageous act I'd ever witnessed had been performed by 3 people I would never know as themselves. "We protect them," I said. Lena looked at me. "We maintain the door. We provide water and food. We monitor their condition, if help comes. The military, the government, anyone. We tell them what's here. We tell them these aren't just infected. These are people who chose to contain themselves. They deserve to be studied, not killed. They deserve the chance that a cure could bring them back." Lena was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. "We protect them," she agreed. It became our 3rd mission. Seal the mall, survive, and guard the door. Days accumulated like sediment. December became a rhythm. Every morning I descended with water and food. Every morning the previous day's containers were returned, neat and empty. The gap in the door became a threshold, not between safety and danger, but between 2 kinds of survival happening in parallel. Lena and I developed a routine that filled the hours between fear. We inventoried every store methodically, cataloging resources with a specificity that would have seemed obsessive in the old world, but now felt essential. The Brookstone had battery packs that could keep our flashlights charged for months. The Bath and Body Works had alcohol-based sanitizers that doubled as antiseptic. A camping display in Dick's yielded sleeping bags rated to 15 degrees, a portable water filter, and a camp stove with propane canisters. On December 20th, we heard helicopters. 3 of them, moving fast over the building, heading southwest. We ran to the skylights on the 3rd floor and pressed our faces against the glass. Military, black, unmarked, flying in formation. They didn't slow. They didn't circle. They passed over the King of Prussia Mall like it was just another building in just another suburb. And then they were gone. Lena didn't react outwardly. But that night, she disassembled and reassembled her makeshift weapon 3 times. A repetitive motion that I recognized from my own anxious habits as the physical equivalent of screaming. "They're not coming for us," I said. "No. This might be long-term. I've been operating under that assumption since December 12th. Then we need to think beyond survival. We need to think about living." It was a subtle distinction, but an important one. Survival is reactive. You respond to threats, manage resources, maintain biological function. Living is proactive. You create structure, find meaning, sustain psychological health. We had been surviving. We needed to start living, or the isolation would erode us faster than any infection. We designated spaces. The security office remained our sleeping quarters, but we claimed a nearby cafe as our kitchen and dining area. We set tables, found unbroken dishes, and began eating meals together at consistent times. Breakfast at 7 a.m., dinner at 6 p.m. Lena found a chess set in a toy store, and we played every evening, neither of us particularly skilled, both of us grateful for the cognitive engagement. On December 22nd, I found a bookstore that hadn't been touched. Shelves lined with unread stories. I took an armload back to the security office, and we began a practice that probably saved my sanity, reading aloud to each other for an hour each night. Lena preferred history. I gravitated toward fiction. We alternated, and in the evening glow of battery-powered lanterns, the mall became almost livable. The infected. I had stopped calling them that internally. They were the doctors, the three, or simply them, remained consistent. Water consumed, containers returned, no aggression, no attempts to breach the chain gap. Twice more I heard the word thank when I delivered supplies. Once I heard something that might have been water, spoken so slowly and deliberately that each syllable seemed to cost enormous effort. On December 24th, I brought the Bluetooth speaker to the basement door and played Debussy again. The humming returned, more organized than before. One of the three voices, the higher one, managed to track the melody with remarkable accuracy for nearly 30 seconds before losing the thread. When the music ended, the crying didn't come. Instead, silence. Then a new sound, a rhythmic tapping on the door. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. A pattern, communication. I knocked back. 3 knocks. The tapping stopped. Then, from behind the door, 3 knocks again. Faster this time. And something that might have been, I can't be certain, but I swear I heard it. A sound that resembled laughter. Not malicious, not deranged. The broken, grateful laughter of someone who has been heard. I pressed my forehead against the cold metal of the door and stayed there until my breathing steadied. Merry Christmas, I thought. Merry Christmas to all of us. January brought the real test. On January 3rd, voices outside, not infected. Human, aggressive, and organized. I was on the 2nd floor when I heard them, pounding on the sealed JCPenney gate with something heavy and metallic. I found Lena already at the gate, standing in the shadows, watching through the glass. 5 people, 3 men, 2 women, armed with makeshift weapons and 1 actual firearm. A shotgun carried by a tall man in a hunting jacket who appeared to be leading the group. They were shouting, demanding entry. One of the women was injured, her left arm wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. "Let us in. We know someone's in there. We saw the lights." Lena looked at me. This was the moment our sealed world intersected with the chaos beyond it. And every decision branched into consequences we couldn't predict. We opened the gate. They came in like water through a break in a dam. The leader's name was Dale. The others were his brother Kevin, a couple named Sandra and Jim, who had been surviving in a nearby church basement, and the injured woman Teresa, who had been bitten. I saw Lena register the word and its implications. Teresa's wound was on her forearm. Deep, ragged, unmistakably human teeth marks, inflamed with the telltale discoloration of early infection. She had maybe 48 hours before the fever stage, based on what we'd observed and what Dr. Mehta's notes described. Dale knew. He stood in our food court with a shotgun resting against his shoulder and looked me in the eye and said, "She's my wife. If you're going to make this a problem, we'll leave. But she's my wife, and she's staying with me until the end." "We have a place for her," I said. Lena shot me a look that contained multitudes. I told them about the basement. Not everything, not the doctors, not the humming, not the word thank, spoken through a gap in chained doors. I told them we had a quarantine area, isolated and secure, where Teresa could be monitored and made comfortable. Dale resisted until Sandra, the quietest of the group, put her hand on his arm and said, "Let them help. This is more than we had an hour ago." Teresa went into the basement voluntarily. We set up the shelter room, Dr. Mehta's former quarters, with a mattress, blankets, water, and food. I removed the medical pages from the wall before she entered. She didn't need to read about the progression she was about to experience. The next 2 days were the most difficult of the entire ordeal. Teresa deteriorated visibly. The fever hit on January 4th, the tremors on the 5th. Dale sat outside the shelter room door for hours, talking to her through the wall, telling her stories about their daughter, who was with Teresa's mother in Harrisburg, hopefully, possibly, maybe still alive. On January 5th at 11 p.m., Teresa stopped responding to Dale's voice. The sounds from the shelter room changed. The aggression stage of thrashing, vocalization, impact against walls. Dale pressed his hands over his ears and wept. Kevin stood behind him with one hand on his brother's shoulder and said nothing because nothing existed in any language that could address this. When morning came, Teresa was quiet. I approached the door and listened. Breathing, fast, ragged, but stabilizing. And then, faintly, the humming. The same tonal pattern the 3 doctors produced. Teresa had joined their frequency. I unchained the red doors to the central mechanical room, wide enough for a person to pass through. The humming from inside rose in volume, then settled. I led Teresa, shuffling, unrecognizable, her eyes carrying a vacancy that was almost but not entirely complete, down the corridor and to the threshold. She stopped at the doors, tilted her head, listened to the humming inside. Then she walked through, and one of the 3 inside took her hand and guided her into the dark. I rechained the doors. 4 voices hummed now, where 3 had hummed before. Dale never forgave me. I never expected him to. We stayed in the King of Prussia Mall for 47 days. On January 29th, a military convoy reached us. Not rescue exactly, but evacuation. They gave us 12 minutes to gather essentials. I told the commanding officer about the basement, about the doctors, about Teresa, about the humming and the folded clothes and the words spoken through a gap in a chained door. He listened with the expression of a man hearing something that didn't fit his operational framework. He said he'd note it in his report. I don't know what they did after we left. Lena and I were separated at the processing facility in Lancaster. Different intake groups, different buses, different destinations. I never saw her again. I looked. I'm still looking. What I carry from that place isn't fear. It's the sound of a broken voice saying thank through a 6-inch gap. It's the knowledge that 3 doctors walked into their own destruction with folded clothes and research notes, and the intention to protect strangers they would never meet. I was not brave. I only opened a door. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the most human thing you can do is refuse to look away from what's still human in the dark.